Cascades of dirt dripped slowly down a mountain the size of a shrub, each grain contributing to the ocean of earth draped like melted glass on the mantle of soil at the tree's base. A shovel stabbed at the ground, a boot kicked it further in, a pair of hands twisted the handle and threw the pile of dirt onto the tiny mountain. The sun was blocked by dark clouds, nothing more than a marble on the blanket of the sky, neither blue nor black, just existing and listening to the rhythm of the digging. Surrounded by piles of earth, tall and tanned, his shirt dangling from the back pocket of his faded jeans, stood the man working with the shovel. His back was broad, his shoulders were wide, his brow was wet with the side effect of his labor. After one final stroke of the shovel and one final contribution to the mountain at his side, the man dropped the shovel to the dirt. He stood still, looking at the hole he had dug, clawing at the patch of mud on his cheek. The hole was in the shape of a rectangle, not perfect of course, but most likely large enough and deep enough to work. The man looked to the casket at his right and lifted his hand, his thumb jutting out from the rest of his combined fingers to form a 90-degree angle. He lined up his hand with the bottom right part of the casket, squinted, then being very careful to preserve the shape of the angle, lined it up with the hole below him. It would work. Moving behind the casket, he clapped his hands, then bent over and began to push. It was light enough to push, at least. The lifting machine had broken over the weekend, much to the gravedigger's dismay. The earth tore away in strips at his boots as he pushed on the casket with extended arms. After a brief struggle, it fell into the hole on its proper side. The man exhaled, then took a seat at the edge of the hole, letting his legs rest on the casket. He wasn't squeamish. A thump. The man looked behind him, expecting to see someone bobbing in between the gravestones and trees. There wasn't anyone. Another thump. This time he felt his feet move. Another thump. The casket below him began to shake, shedding stray dirt like a dog shaking water from its coat. The gravedigger recoiled, standing with a jolt of energy. More thumping. Each new thump from the casket increased in volume and intensity. Finally, the lid burst open. A woman with her skin intact, maybe a bit pale, dressed in a white gown, gasped for a breath of air. The gravedigger, eyes wide, kneeled into a crouch at the edge of the hole. "Hey," his voice cracked. "Let's get you out of there." The woman grabbed his hand, and he pulled her out of her grave. After crawling out of the hole, she kneeled against the dirt mountain, taking huge breaths at a speed that truly astounded the gravedigger. She flailed her hands as if desperately longing to hit something. She settled on tearing her gown, which now looked more like a skirt. The gravedigger didn't know what to say. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, unsure what else to add. A crow landed on a gravestone near them and cawed. The woman looked at the gravedigger with clouded green eyes. "Ma'am?" he asked again. "You've got to put me back," the woman said. Her eyes darted to the casket she was in moments ago. As if transfixed, she took a step towards the hole. The gravedigger gripped her by her cold wrist, keeping her dangling like a doll before pulling her back. "Wait, hold on. What are you talking about? You're still alive," he exclaimed. The crow from the gravestone took flight and landed on the gravedigger's shoulder. "No, she's not," squawked the crow. The gravedigger looked to his shoulder, rolled his eyes, then looked back at the girl. Her white attire was grimy, smeared in dirt. Her muddy eyes looked distant. "It's true," she said. "It's over for me. I'd love nothing more than to go back into my casket now." She stood up and with a bare foot took a step past the gravedigger. She jumped into the hole, then began dusting away at the dirt caking the satin inside the casket. The gravedigger watched her clean her grave in a state of disillusion. He looked again to the crow on his shoulder. "And you think I should just let her go through with this?" he whispered to the crow. "Just another body," it replied. The woman, now laying in her cleaned casket, reached to the lid and gripped it with her spindly fingers. "You'll bury me, won't you?" she asked with a smile. The gravedigger paused, contemplating the implications of his decision. Regardless of what the crow told him, he still felt an uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. He felt a certain restlessness and uncomfortability, and yet the punch of an opportunity. "What did you see?" he asked, ignoring her request. "What?" "When you died, what did you see?" the gravedigger questioned. The woman smiled. "The most beautiful thing. It was so clear, so warm, flowing like sweet molasses. It was glowing. I felt like I had everything I wanted and everything I didn't know I wanted," she explained. The gravedigger found his lips curling upwards. He reached for the shovel with his calloused hands. The crow flew from his shoulder and landed on a gravestone nearby, shedding a single black feather in the process that descended into the hole with a gentle glide. The woman struggled to fit the lid of the casket into place, but finally managed, and the gravedigger was left standing atop the earth, overlooking the hole, gripping his shovel in both hands. Borrowing earth from the dirt mountain to his side, he found his rhythm once more and began filling the hole. As the gravedigger continued to shovel and the mountain continued to shrink, he almost felt like he could hear the faintest of thumping at his feet, but he chose to ignore it. He was engrossed in his rhythm, obeying the feelings in the pit of his stomach. He began to hum, drowning out the thumping below. The crow landed on his shoulder once more. He continued to dig. "Do you believe her?" it asked. "Maybe. Best not to think about it now," the gravedigger hummed. "I'm just filling the hole." The gravedigger patted down the remaining soil on the plot. The mountain at his side was gone. The soil at his feet was dark and wet. The thumping was weak, slowing down, fading from his memory. He moved to the tree where the dirt mountain once stood and sat down, propping his tired back against the firm trunk. The crow sat in a branch above him. The sun was still blocked by clouds, still a marble in the blanket of the sky. The gravedigger stared at the spot where the casket once was. He stretched his neck. "You've still got another one to go today," the crow cawed. The gravedigger looked to his left. Another casket. This one was made from a more expensive material. The brass clasp was done firmly. The edges were lined with ivory. A bouquet of white flowers lay still on the top of the casket. The gravedigger sighed and kicked at the air with his boot. He ran his coarse hand through his hair and reached into his pocket. He dug until he fetched a small white box. He undid the lid and measured a dose. With a glass dropper, he placed a dosage of the clear, molasses-like liquid onto his tongue. One pupil shrank, the other dilated. The gravedigger put the vial back into the box and put the box back into his pocket. He stood from the tree, his hand outstretched, anticipating the cold grip of the shovel. A thump. This one was louder, closer. The gravedigger looked to the casket with the ebony trim. It remained still, as if frozen in time. A thump. The casket moved. The gravedigger ran over and quickly went to work to undo the clasp with manic hands as the crow continued to caw. He fumbled with the metal clasp, finally managing to lift the lid of the casket, cutting himself in the process and spilling some blood onto the pristine white flowers. Upon seeing the contents of the casket, his manic demeanor ceased. His hand slipped away from the lid. He smiled. The crow continued to squawk. "Hi," he said with a certain confidence. The woman inside darted her head to the left, then to the right, then to the left again, her blonde hair waving like prairie grass. Her blue eyes rolled in their sockets, eager to make sense of the situation they found themselves in. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out, only gasps and chokes. "Do you know who you are?" the gravedigger softly asked. The woman turned her shaking head to face him. Her eyes continued to roll aimlessly in any direction they decided to. "Summers," she managed to stammer out. The gravedigger reached into his pocket for the white box. He quickly undid the lid, measured a dosage, and reached out with his hand to the woman, trembling in the casket in front of him. She slapped his hand as it approached. The gravedigger recoiled, surprised at the refusal of his help. "What did you see when you died?" the gravedigger asked, his eyes lighting up like lanterns. There was a rhythmic thumping from the casket and the soil. The crow cawed madly. The gravedigger's lips curled into a smile. "Nothing," the woman croaked. The gravedigger stood from his knee and grabbed his shovel on the way up. He towered over the woman in the casket. He felt the digging rhythm beat in his heart. He began to tap his foot to the thumping coming from the underground. "Just another body," screamed the crow. The gravedigger tapped his foot.